This is a little story about a creep. A creep who thought he had all the power in the world. A creep who probably had a horrific childhood, but a creep nonetheless. Anyways, I first befriended this creep online back in 2011. Facebook, of course. We had mutual friends I trusted, so I assumed he was a cool guy. Well, that was a terrible assumption to make about strangers, whether they are mutual friends or not, but I was a naive 18-year-old girl. His name was Danny. I thought he was a cool guy at first. He had an awesome taste in music and shared a lot of great songs with me. He was also incredibly and inappropriately hilarious. He was full of jokes and bizarre stories, and I soon grew to love talking to him. He never asked if I had a boyfriend. I assumed he knew I did. After all, we were Facebook friends now, and there were pictures of my boyfriend everywhere, and it's not like I kept my relationship status hidden. It was right there for all to see. But I guess he didn't. One day, in October, he decided to tell me how he felt about me. He recited a poem he'd written, comparing me to a beautifully and elegantly handcrafted tapestry. Keep in mind, I never even met the guy, and we'd only been talking for about a month or so. I responded with something along the lines of, "Wow, I wish my boyfriend said stuff like that." He got angry, so angry. He asked me how I could have led him on like this. He asked me how I could do this to him. He had told me he'd opened his heart to me. He begged and pleaded, and supposedly he cried. I was beyond puzzled, and I decided to give him some space, and it worked for a few days, but he eventually messaged me again. He might have apologized, but I honestly can't remember that exact conversation. I do know that things returned to normal, though. He became the silly and fun Danny again. At this point, I had Skype and he had mine. I would talk to him there sometimes, but I never used the camera. I didn't feel comfortable with it. Actually, I hated using my camera with anybody. I told him that when he started to beg me to use it, but he didn't relent. Still, I kept making excuses. Danny wasn't having it, though. He got more aggressive, and then he got sexual. He told me to Skype naked with him. Time after time, I told him no. Eventually, I blocked him on Skype, but I ended up receiving dozens of angry messages on AIM. I don't remember exactly what he said, though I do have screenshots of it all on an external hard drive somewhere. I remember it being hateful and absolutely insane. There was some stuff about me being a really awful friend as well. For long, he told me he was a very excellent hacker. He told me he had a whole slew of hacker friends as well. He told me he could change my college grades and make me fail. He told me he would make my life a living hell. I didn't necessarily believe most of it, but I did believe he would do something. Despite all these negative confrontations, we still had periods of silliness. During these periods, things were normal. I felt safe. To an extent, I tried to keep him happy. I wanted to stay in his good graces, because I really did believe he would attempt to tarnish my reputation otherwise. Before long, he started giving me ultimatums. Either get on Skype with me, or things will be very bad for you. I can tell your boyfriend you're cheating on him. I eventually asked our mutual friends about him. They said he was violent, dangerous, and twisted. Even better, he lived mere minutes away from our college we attended in Reading, Pennsylvania. Every day, I started to get more panicked about going to school. While on campus, I'd look around for guys that looked like him, guys with long red hair and beards, and be wary of anyone who even slightly resembled him. At this point, I was honestly convinced he'd just show up and try to find me. I blocked him on AIM, and I made a new Skype. I knew this would infuriate him, and it sure did. I received another batch of messages on Facebook about how I needed to treat people better. I told him I was uncomfortable with what he was asking of me. He responded with something along the lines of, "Fine, you've chosen your fate." I blocked him on Facebook. I had enough of him terrorizing me. I should have known, though, that it wouldn't be the last time I'd hear from him. At the end of November, I received 3 Facebook messages from somebody named Adam Knowing. Whoever he was, he had joined Facebook a couple of weeks ago and had no friends or content. The message reads as follows. November 27, 2011.
You have been warned repeatedly, and now you are being served notice.
November 29, 2011.
I believe this is your last warning, and that you have been informed of your behavioral issues. The situation will change before the start of next weekend, or action will be taken.
November 30th, 2011.
So, you attend college, right? And your grades are passing? Not for long. You've been warned on how to treat him, and how you are to act. You've got until this week's end to correct this behavior, or life becomes a very difficult thing for you. You should never treat somebody who has a life like this the way you do.
To this day, I'm not sure who Adam Knowing was. It could have been Danny, or it could have been one of his low-life hacker friends. Either way, I was terrified at the time. Against my better judgment, I unblocked Danny from Facebook. By now, my boyfriend was aware of the situation, and he suggested I contact the police if things got any worse. Maybe I should have, but Danny hadn't officially done anything to me. What could they do? Still, I took screenshots of all his screen names. I saved their chat logs on AIM. I took screenshots of all his threatening messages. I saved it all to a folder just in case I needed evidence. Danny's nonsense continued right through Christmas. As usual, on some days he'd be sweet and funny. Otherwise, he was back to being an angry and pressuring psychopath. I promised him a Skype session to calm him down, but I kept using my schoolwork as an excuse to delay it. Shortly after Christmas, I blocked him again on all my accounts. I decided I would deal with whatever repercussions that came with. If I did end up getting hacked, at least I had the evidence, right? A couple weeks went by and nothing actually happened. Then I received a Facebook message from another account I didn't recognize. I don't remember this, but I remember the message.
After careful consideration, you're being let go. You may want to do the respectful thing and thank the one who you have wronged. It is thanks to his compassion that you are being forgiven so easily.
I blocked this account immediately. In January of 2012, something magical happened. I woke up one morning to the news that Danny had been arrested. The charges? Possession and distribution of child pornography. A bunch of his creepy friends had been arrested with him, having been involved with it as well. In 2013, Danny was indicted. He's looking up to 60 years in prison, which will make him almost 90 when he gets out. Even if he's released early, he'll be supervised for the rest of his miserable life. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to post the link to the news story, but it's online somewhere. I guess being a monster creep catches up with you eventually. The following is something that still keeps me up at night. I guess you could say it happened very recently, but it took place over the course of about 5 years. I befriended a guy by the name of Greg when I was in 6th grade. We never really hung out that much outside of school, but we were still thick as thieves. Greg was always a sincere guy. He was nice to everyone at school, even the quote-unquote weirdos, and never wished people ill will, even if they deserved it. That earned him a lot of popularity and a lot of friends, while I remained an uncool wallflower. Senior year of high school rolled around, and Greg confessed that he had a crush on me and presented me with a CD containing a song he had written about his feelings. Unfortunately, I explained that I didn't have feelings for him. Rather, I thought of him as more of a brother. After graduation, I didn't talk to Greg very much, with the exception of a text or two, because I felt really guilty for not being able to return his feelings. He ended up traveling a lot, though, making lots of money from his music and his computer smarts. About 4 months ago, he moved back into town and we started hanging out again. It was great until one day he mentioned that his friend Joe always brings up how he and I, Joe and I, hooked up a long time ago whenever someone says my name in the group chat. Not so weird, guys talk about that sort of thing, right? Greg then proceeded to tell me that Joe made a voice recording in which he described my naked body in extensive detail and sent it to all his friends. This made me uncomfortable because in my mind, Greg was saying, I pretty much know what your naked body looks like. That was weird, but I have a bad habit of giving people the benefit of the doubt, even when they don't deserve it. I figured everyone has said or done something kind of weird before, and I shouldn't take it personally. Fast forward to our most recent hangout, we were having lunch, and he mentioned something about a blog post I had made in which I had written a story about some guy in my class. I found that odd because I haven't posted anything like that on my Tumblr. Greg whipped out his laptop, he always carries it in his backpack, and started telling me that he found this old account of mine when he was going through one of his phases. He then proceeded to Google me harder than I knew was possible. I then realized that my PhotoBucket account wasn't private, and there were some scandalous photos in there intended for my boyfriend. My bad, I know. There were no nudes, thankfully. I asked him if he had seen all these photos, and he said yeah, like it was nothing. I wrapped up lunch as quickly as possible so I wouldn't have to endure any more of his relentless digging up on my old accounts, many of which I had completely forgotten about up until this point. On the way home, he started playing some music for me. This is a new one, he said, and as I listened to the lyrics, I heard my name sung multiple times. 3 more songs played with my name or description in them, complete with lyrics about longing and desire and how I haven't noticed him. I started getting this burning sensation in my stomach, unlike the queasy discomfort I had felt before. I should also mention that He had always been aware of the fact that I had a boyfriend. I never misled Greg by not talking to him about my relationship in front of him or flirting with him, so I found it odd that he didn't pick up on my obvious defensive body language when he started digging through my past and playing songs that he'd written about me. I tried to blow it off like it was nothing. He had recently been on a lot of medication for mental health issues, anxiety, and other things that weren't too extreme. But the whole thing jogged my memory a bit, and I realized how many times he had supposedly accidentally bumped into me out and about in the months prior to us hanging out. The last two things I would mention about this whole ordeal is that when he moved back, he moved into a house 2 doors down from the one I was renting. I never even told him where I lived. And in the years we weren't talking, I noticed some problems in my webcam. The little light would come on and off without the application being open. I'm not very computer savvy. I don't know if people can still do this, but I have a really sick feeling in my stomach when I think about the chances of them hacking into my webcam to watch me. I still don't know if I'm overreacting. It's not that bizarre for a guy to fall in love and do stupid things and then swim. Regardless though, dear old friend, let's not meet again. This happened a couple of years ago. I've only had a couple friends who I told about this, and my parents, because I didn't want my old friend to feel exposed, and because of my odd feelings about this person's behavior were dismissed. I was chatting with friends online, as one does, when I received a message from an old friend. His behavior was off-putting the last time we had seen each other, but it had been several years, so I stupidly wrote back. We exchanged pleasantries, blah blah blah, and he asked what I was up to, where I would be, and he would be in our hometown a lot and we should meet up. At that point I thought we would probably meet up at some point during the year and catch up over coffee, and that if it didn't work out it'd be no big deal. We hadn't seen each other in nearly 10 years. To preface the rest of the story, when I say I want to meet up and set a date or time, I am genuinely interested in meeting up. If it's just not working out, I will cancel a few days ahead if we made a plan, but I'll generally avoid making a plan if I'm not into it, and not reschedule. Most of my mates do that too, as those are generally accepted social cues in our town. This friend is from the same town, and we used to be familiar with the subtle hints of the other person isn't as keen as hanging out as you are. Nothing wrong with it. People have done it to me before. I've done it to people before too. No harm, no foul. So I thought anyways. From the day I responded to that first message, he started asking what would be a good time to hang out. I worked and rarely had a full day off, let alone time to grocery shop, so I said I wasn't sure. After a few more friendly-seeming messages, we set a time and date. I ended up having to cancel twice though due to work, and that's when everything escalated. Every time I appeared online, I would receive a slew of long messages. I wasn't even on half the time, my phone was though, so I didn't respond right away. I would receive even more messages. I thought he was just a little excited. I mean, we've all been that person at some point, so I chalked it up to him maybe being a bit socially inept, and I turned off my chat. Fortunately for me, anytime I opened a message on my phone, my chat would turn on again and he would message within 5 seconds, like he had been waiting for me to appear online the whole time. With a looming work deadline and lots of work to do, I had finally had enough, not just of my particular friend's messages, but my lack of productivity in general about project deadlines. So I turned off all my social media, except my work phone, and got to work. That's when things got even worse. Apparently he had sent me several messages before I logged out of my account and took it personally when I didn't respond. So he started calling, texting, and leaving voicemails on my work phone. I wasn't even sure how he'd gotten my work number, but a quick Google search reminded me you can find almost anything about anyone online. The texts and calls were incessant. I firmly told him that I had work to do, that I had to turn chat off for everyone, and that I wouldn't be getting in touch until my work deadline had passed in 5 days' time. He said he understood, and I thought I would have 5 days to focus on work. But the next day he started texting me again about questions he already knew the answer to, just to elicit a response. ignoring him just seemed to make him more mad. 5 days later, I got in touch like I said I would, and the barrage of messages started again. I was apprehensive about even meeting him at this point, but I was pressured into saying yes by our mutual friends. Just one coffee, they said. When I agreed to coffee, he immediately tried to make it feel like I owed him more, and insisted we go out for dinner. When I said no, things got even worse. At that point, I hadn't even agreed to meet up, and he was being relentless. I felt my stomach drop. If he couldn't respect my no then, when would he? If he couldn't respect my boundaries when I needed 5 days for work, when would he? I felt sick about it all and canceled the way our townfolk would, by excusing myself and apologizing for it not working out with a spineless "see you when I see you." Being firm with him when we were deciding where to meet up stirred up his ire, so I wanted to avoid that sort of reaction. I also didn't know how to explain all the calls and texts were extremely off-putting without inviting more guilting and manipulation. Do you think cutting things off nicely works for someone who can't respect boundaries? It doesn't. Being firm doesn't work either. He kept calling and texting and leaving voicemails. I ignored every single one of them at this point. I didn't feel comfortable at home or in my own skin. He always seemed to know where I was and what I was doing, suggesting that we meet at events that I clicked attending to, which I'd stopped doing. The more I ignored, the worse it got. I told my parents and they said he would eventually stop contacting me and that I didn't owe him anything, but it went on for months. Sometimes it would be once a week, sometimes it would be 3 times a week, sometimes 2 weeks would go by before I would receive anything from him. It was my work phone, so I couldn't change the number, nor did I think the calling would persist. I also wanted a record of all of it in case things got violent. I didn't want to respond because then he would think that the barrage of calls and texts worked. At that point, I was honestly too scared to tell him off. That's when things started getting weird. Sometimes, someone would keep reporting my online social media account, so I would get locked out. I constantly received messages about somebody trying to crack my passwords online. Strange people with only one friend on their account trying to add me. Weird stuff that I don't know how to explain without sounding absolutely mental. After 6 months, I finally sent a message telling him to please leave me alone. He apologized and claimed that my last message said I would get in touch within 5 days and that I didn't, and that I had led him on. Even then, if somebody ignores 2 of my calls and messages, ball is in their court. I stopped getting in touch. Not out of respect for the person, then out of respect for myself. That was my work deadline from 7 months prior. We had a few conversations after my work deadline, so I knew it was bullshit. I didn't write back. Again, I thought it was over, but it wasn't. The next week and a half, he sent page after page of messages telling me how awful I was, telling me how I had led him on, that he didn't really know who I had become, that he had just wasted his time, that he wasn't even interested in me, and that I had made him feel bad for pursuing me when we were really just old friends. I still got the odd message. I kept getting locked out of my accounts despite changing passwords and verification settings. I kept getting messages from strange emails. After I blocked one, I would get a new message from another account about how all women like me are attention-seeking scum. I still have nightmares about this person. But, creepy old friend, let's not meet. Hey all, personal note from the reader, or thanks Spooky here. If I were you, I would take these stories into account and not employ these tactics if you wish to rekindle a relationship with somebody. I mean, then again, if you are doing these things, you're most likely crazy anyways, so I guess there's no point in me warning you. But anyways, see you all next time.